Welcome back to another episode of Important Miscellaneous Talks. I'm your host, Glassfield Crossfield, and we are changing the world one podcast at a time. Please, please, please give a warm welcome to our guest. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. It's me. Let's ask Shogo's Shogo Yamaguchi. Thank you so much for today.
No problem. Explain who you are for the people who may not know.
Thank you so much. I'm actually a YouTuber. Very thankfully, I have more than 1 million subscribers. Actually, 1.39 million subscribers. I'm 100% Japanese, but I used to live in the U.S. for 6 years, and my channel is completely in English. But I talk about Japanese history, Japanese culture, and all the things that I train in, including the katana, tea ceremony, no theater, and the shakuhachi, the flute, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
What ages were you in the United States?
I was in the US from 5 to 11 years old, so that'd be 6 years in Michigan.
Interesting, interesting. But
hmm
was there a big difference? It might be too young to remember, but was there like a big cultural difference?
Between Japan and the US, I mean?
Yeah,
Very, very big. Absolutely.
got you.
W-
Yeah.
Completely different, yeah. Um, the biggest difference absolutely is that when I was in the US, well, at least where I grew up, a lot of the people, like teachers or my friends, a lot of people would be like, express yourself, like, have to have your own opinions, for example, and you have to have the courage to say it, that kind of stuff. But in Japan, as I often talk about in my videos, I talk a lot about social problems in Japan too, social issues and such. And I talk about it, but Japan is more of a culture of, harmony, fitting in, all being normal, being the same kind of culture. So it was very, very, very different for me. So big culture shock, actually.
Interesting. What would you say
hmm
is the goal of the kind of content that you make?
The goal of my content. Well, I do eventually want to be instructors of all the things that I train in right now. So basically, I do like read books and talk about, for example, food culture or all of these other topics too. But I do seriously train in, for example, Iaido, the katana training, or tea ceremony, as I said earlier, so on and so forth. So eventually, I do want to make more, should I say, deeper content for the people who are interested, and eventually start my own dojos or start my own classes overseas too. Yeah, in and out of Japan would be
Got
great.
you, got you. What
hmm
what made you want to start a YouTube?
So it was actually COVID that basically forced me to do it. So I originally was working in tourism industry in Kyoto. So there's a lot of guests coming in from overseas and they were traveling. I was providing some culture experiences. So basically it was like a 90-minute experience where people would come in, they'll train how to swing the sword, and at the end they would hold onto a real one and cut the mats actually that we cut for test cutting. Yeah, it was that kind of experience. I was running that. I was the instructor there, but because of COVID, there were absolutely no more guests coming into Japan anymore. And because that was the only thing I was doing back at that time, I had to do something new. And I was actually doing a few other jobs too, but YouTube was one of the challenges that I took at that time. Yeah.
What was your original career path?
So basically, I just really loved, meeting people, talking with people and such. So I originally was running a restaurant in my first job after graduating university. Yeah. And then from there, I was working in tourism industry for about 3 years. And I was just basically thinking it'd be great if I can just, continue working in the tourism industry. And I was already trading in the things that I train in right now, like katana and such. So I was thinking the same thing. It'd be great if I can like become an instructor someday, hold my own dojo, welcome my own guests and such. Because at that time I was still employed at a facility.
What do you think are some of the biggest issues that Japan faces today, and what are some of the ways that we can fix them?
hmm That is a very difficult question. There's a lot of issues that Japan faces right now. I have actually a playlist on my channel just talking about social issues. I think I have probably something around 15, 20 videos, maybe, possibly. But, well, I think the biggest problem Japan has, the most fundamental one, is probably the decline of the population. I think Elon Musk once talked about it in his tweet actually that Japan's population is declining, and if we don't do anything about it, Japan will eventually be gone, and that's exactly what's going to be happening right now because Japan, although I made a video about this recently about Japan shrinking, the population, and although Japan is shrinking right now and it's a major problem, and Japan is the oldest country in the world, the average age is actually the highest in the world, so there's less babies, there's more elderly, and the government isn't doing anything about it because the people who have the most number of votes are the people who are the elderly. So basically, the government, all of these policies or everything are basically mainly for the elderly who would go to the vote, who would go to vote. So
Mm.
there'll be less babies because they won't support the younger, right? So the system right now is definitely a big problem in Japan, I think. Yeah, and especially Japan has, in its original culture, has a very strong, hierarchical relationship. The
Yes.
if you know about Japanese culture, the senpai, kohai kind of thing, the superior junior relationship. So especially in Japan, originally, conventionally, the younger generations have very small voices in society in the first place. And
Mm.
now the population is even small, and the culture still suppresses them. So the future for younger generations in Japan is very, very dark because of these systematical, disorders, I would say. Yeah, and it's a very big problem, I would say. Yeah.
What do you think are some of the ways that we can fix that issue?
That is going to be a really, really difficult thing. I proposed a few things in my video too. For example, things that countries overseas, from Japan's point of view, have done before would be, for example, to accept immigrants. For example, that'd be one thing.
Mm.
For example, making more rules for voting, like for example, the younger generations going to vote is mandatory. For example, right now it's really sad, but less than half of the people in their 20s and 30s go to vote in the first place because they don't have any hope for a future. And the
Mm.
elderly, about 60 to 70% go to vote because they know that they're in control. So, for example, we change the rules so that the younger generations have to go to vote 100%. It's mandatory. And the people from, for example, 60 or 70 years old is optional. Maybe we can change it. But again, accepting immigrants, providing more money to parents who are raising kids, or again, changing the system of voting. The people who have the right to change these systems again are the elderly in Japan.
Mhm.
So would they want to make that change? The answer is probably going to be no. So that's the really, really difficult part about Japan right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed in places, not just Japan, just like even in communities
Yeah.
all across the world, where if you
Mm-hmm.
don't incorporate the younger generation, they
Mm-hmm.
grow up with a level of resentment, and they're not gonna
Mm-hmm.
be willing to follow your ways when they get older. Because once they have enough power to do what they want to do and move away, you're gonna lose them. It's gonna be
Exactly.
hard for a community to grow and to thrive continually if there's a disconnect between generations.
Exactly, absolutely. So yeah, I'm sorry, I might not be able to, answer your question that clearly because I don't see a solution so far. If there was a solution that I could think of, probably someone else would be already doing it. So that's the thing. But for me, yeah, those are the things that I've studied about. But again, yeah, it's very, very difficult and complicated.
And there also has to be a willingness to implement some of those solutions. Because
Exactly, that's right.
I notice with the older generations, they typically are more stuck in their ways. And it's
Exactly,
very
exactly.
hard to break through to a lot of
Oh
them.
yeah.
So not only have to
Yes,
find
yes,
a
yes.
solution, you have to find a group of the older generation who's willing to listen and implement those rules. So that
Exactly.
that
And
is
then again,
quite
we
the
go
task.
back to, again, the hierarchical relationship, in Japan, it's basically believed that the younger generations or people who are considered lower should obey the higher people. So we especially have that strong, belief in the base of our thoughts, first of all. So it makes it even more difficult. So the elderly, because they grew up when they were younger, they were suppressed too as the younger generation, right? So as they were growing up, they eventually was looking forward to becoming the superior generation that gets to control the
Mhm,
younger generation.
mhm.
So they were waiting for the throne, basically, to be kings and queens in the future. And now they are, but the younger generations, the population is just so small. And there's this norm that younger people or juniors in a community should have a hard time because that's how the system works. in a really strong hierarchical system, you know? So that's another thing, you know?
Yeah, I've noticed that because my parents are Jamaican, and it's kind of the same way where there's a disconnect of when I was young, all you did was shut up and listen to your parents. You
Mm.
know, they discipline you sometimes and you don't even know what you did wrong. You just know that you don't do it again. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think in Japan it's a bit more intense where it's just like, yo, we're older than you, just listen to us. That's the bottom line. That's the
Exactly,
bottom line.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
it
that's all the senpai kohai stuff you see in anime too, you know? Yeah,
Oh wow. Yeah, damn, I wish my friend
exactly,
was on.
exactly.
He's a big anime fan. I can't keep up. There's too many. One Piece is 50,000 episodes. I can't do
Oh
it.
yeah.
You mentioned earlier about the immigration thing.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
And Japan, I hear, is one of the toughest countries for someone to come into the country and to get citizenship.
Exactly. That's true.
Why do you think that? Well, I kind of understand what the culture is very like, like they really hold it near and dear. So they don't want just anybody waltzing in there and just to be incorporated into a simulate. So I get that from that degree, but are there any other reasons why it's so difficult to obtain citizenship in Japan?
I think that would be mainly be the reason, to be honest, though. You know, Japan is an island nation, yeah, and basically our communities are really run by the system, you know. And
Yeah.
when someone comes in who doesn't know the system, you know,
Mm.
like for example, you know, we often talk about that Japan has a lot of these, you know, rules and manners. We talk about them. Take for example, chopsticks or bowings, the angle that you bow or whatever it is. The reason why Japan has so many rules is because we're living in such a small island, and we need to get along to, live through a lot of the natural disasters that happen in Japan. So I talk about this in a few of my videos actually, where I talk about Bushido rule in Japan. Actually, I made a video about that. It actually has 1 million views, but I talked about that from ancient times in Japan, because Japan is the country that has the most number of natural disasters, and also is
Wow.
a really small island. We literally have everything from earthquakes to volcano eruptions to typhoons, landslides to literally everything, right? So Japanese people from ancient times really need to work together in order to survive with the few resources that we have, yeah, and the limited amount of space that we can live in and such. Because 70% of Japan is actually mountains that people can't live on. So we need to live in 30% of us left and still work together and survive the natural disasters. That's the reason why we need a lot of rules to try to find out the people who would be basically not fit in, be the nail that sticks out. We need to kick them out, because if something happens, for example, in Japan, if some trouble happens, natural disaster, earthquake happens, we need to help out each other and stuff. We really need to cooperate. So people who can't cooperate in during a crisis would be big trouble for the community. So they need to kick them out as soon as possible. That's the reason why we had so many rules from ancient times. And even today, we still have that custom. So basically, if you don't follow the rules, you'll never be a part of the community. And when you come from a different, culture, it's very difficult for you to deeply understand, the rules and the systems and the atmosphere. Exactly, exactly. So that's one of the things culturally I can explain, yeah, in that way too.
It's a way to try to weed out the weak.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Yep, exactly, exactly.
They make it so difficult because they
Hmm.
know that most people probably won't go through with it. But the people who are willing to go through with it, they know that they will be part of the community if disaster strikes.
Exactly. That's the thing. Yep, yep. So
Gotcha.
it's basically, I'm not here to say that that's a bad thing or a good thing. It was just a survival tactic, basically, back for the Japanese people back at that time. It was for them to survive. That's something they developed, but. Mhm.
What would you say is the three most unique things about the Japanese culture in your eyes?
Three most? That is very, very difficult, but three most, I might not be able to like rank them immediately, but I guess the few things that would immediately come to my mind is the first thing absolutely is that we cherish harmony so much.
Mm,
So a lot of people would say, for example, I'm not here to criticize Japan or anything, but it's a good thing. But a lot of people say that one of the best things about Japan is that, for example, the streets are clean. But we got to think about why then. Why does Japan want to have our streets clean? is because no one who, for example, I own this building, I own this building, no one wants to make their front of the building dirty because they don't want to bother other people. That's the reason why everyone wants everywhere clean, because they want to say, I'm not the one bothering the community. I'm
Mm.
not the one troubling the group. That's the reason why the surface tends to look very clean, So I think how we cherish harmony, or in other words, we can say always focusing what other people think about you, I think is especially very strong in Japan, to a point that it's very, it looks, the streets can turn completely clean, that kind of level, I would say. So yeah, so growing up in the U.S., studying abroad in China, I actually did that for 1 year. My wife I met her in Beijing,
Oh, wow.
So I've been to a few places before, and of course, Asian countries, we do have similar culture, but I think it's especially intense in Japan. That's one thing I can absolutely say. The two other things. I need to try to make my brain work at 10 p.m. But I guess another thing I can say, maybe this isn't something directly related to culture, but I do really like. There was one professor who was saying that one of the reasons why Japan's nature is beautiful. Of course, there are a lot of beautiful places around the world, but one of the reasons why Japan's nature is very unique and beautiful is because we have a lot of natural disasters. So there are a lot of species, growing together, plants or flowers or trees or whatever it is. And if there aren't any constant natural disasters, eventually there will be these strong species that will dominate all other species and take over. But because Japan has volcano eruptions and landslides and tsunamis and typhoons and everything, basically it's all destroyed once in a while and it's all reset. So that's the reason why there's a lot of diversity in nature and animals and all that kind of stuff. So I can say, if we talk about something positive, we see it in a positive way. Like for example, the wabi sabi, or the Budo mental training, for example. All these uniqueness definitely flourished because of this, I think. Yeah, yeah. It's that the Japanese unique, for example, Zen philosophies, relationships, religion. I think all these things were able to be created because of the diversity that existed in Japan. That'd be the second thing. I'm just trying to look for another one, maybe, but I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure if one thing would immediately come to my mind, but those two would probably be the first ones that would come out. I think. Yeah.
Okay,
One more thing. Yeah. I'll think about it as we maybe talk about something else. Yeah.
got you. Uh, so this is an interesting question. Uh,
Please.
if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong,
Mm-hmm.
the age of consent in Japan is 13, correct?
Exactly.
Now, outside looking in from an American's point of view, that sounds outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
One of the I interviewed someone recently. He's from America, but he lives in Thailand currently. And
Mm-hmm.
he talked to me about, just do your best not to judge when it comes to that, because first of all, you're not a part of the culture, so you may
Mm-hmm.
not know outside looking in. It might be quick for you to say something about it that you don't necessarily know all the facts of. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
cultures, when a woman has, her first menstrual cycle, a lot of people start to consider her a woman. Then he also mentioned like
Mm-hmm.
how the mother Mary, like in the book of the Bible, was also pretty young, like when she conceived Jesus. So, but yeah, so why is the age of consent seemingly that young?
That is a very, very difficult question. And one thing, first of all, I don't have what should I say, perfect answer to your question, because I have not done much research about this. But one thing I absolutely say is that for me as a Japanese person, it never came to my mind,
Mm,
talking about this. One thing we can absolutely say is that I think the majority of Japanese people probably don't notice that this is something
mm,
outrageous. So I
okay.
don't know the answer to your question, but one thing I can say is absolutely that. If you ask a Japanese person the same question, they'd be like, "What is outrageous about this?" I know because I have a lot of people from overseas watching my videos, and they would ask me questions about that and such. So I would know, but I think most Japanese people would be like, "What's so unique about it?" I think.
Mhm.
Do I have answers to that though? I definitely need to do more research about that.
Got you. So
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably a law that probably doesn't really get much notice because it really doesn't come into play most times. That's probably why.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, we never talk about it. Yeah.
Got you, got you. That's interesting.
Hmm.
I would need to do a public interview in Japan and maybe ask around one day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why why do the Japanese people live so long? It seems like you guys figured out some sort of diet hack or something, or maybe it's a harmonious background that just makes you want to stay alive longer. What it seems like you guys got some cheat code figured out.
Yeah, I guess that would probably be the food that we have, you know?
That would have
Yeah,
been my first guess, yeah.
yeah, the very rich, probably a lot of the either the fermented food culture, like the miso, the natto, all these kind of foods are really, really good for health, you know. And also, there's a lot of the seafood that's really healthy for you
Mm.
as well. There's a lot of minerals in it, all that kind of stuff. For example, seaweed, that's really, not that common outside of Japan that we eat is considered to be really, really rich in nutritions and everything too, and minerals and vitamin. Yeah.
I hate the taste of seaweed, man. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
It's
if you're not
so
used to it.
salty. It's so salty to me. But I've only had it like
Uh-huh.
a handful of times though. I probably had it like 2 or 3 times. And once if you give me a bad first impression as a food, I rarely go back to it. But I'm hearing so many health
Uh-huh.
benefits from it. I might have to if it tastes good, it probably isn't good for you anyway.
That's true.
Honestly.
That's true. Exactly. So you should not eat it if it's not good. Yeah.
If it tastes good,
Because
spit it out.
there's a lot of different types of seaweed,
Hmm.
in Japan. There's like the dried ones called nori, or the ones that you put in miso soup or stuff like that, be called wakame, for example. Wakame or nori is not salty at all. So there
Interesting.
there are the salty ones, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Exactly. The
it was
kombu,
probably the Americanized seaweed. It was like green. It came in a pack,
maybe.
and my friend gave it to me, and I tried. I was like, "Oh no, I can't. I can't." They
Yeah.
were
If
eating
it's the
like a regular snack, like they were like a chip.
oh really? I think that might be the maybe the shiokombu it's called. It's kombu is a different type of really chewy kind of salty kind of seaweed actually. And I don't like that either, by the way. I never eat that myself. Yeah.
Okay, I might need to talk to you about being my seaweed plug, man. I might need you to keep over some good seaweed, man.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so it's absolutely the food I would say, the health, yeah. Japanese people live in
Yeah, and I
longer.
also think that the food isn't as modified because you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
seafood, and that made me think about the seafood here, which is still probably better than you eating a burger or something. But they
Mm-hmm.
modify the seafood here as well, so I'm assuming that
Mm-hmm.
you guys are probably more natural over there, less preservatives, things of that nature. So, wow,
Mm-hmm.
that's fantastic. So, again, correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I hear that Japan has been implementing more women in power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do you think that there's any connect with that and sort of the decline in any regards?
The population, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, in general.
I think there must be some relationships, I think. But I think the bigger reason would probably be, well, there's a lot of factors to this.
Mhm.
I think the bigger thing would probably be Japan's economy just simply weakening for a really long time. In Japan, we call it the lost 30 years. Actually, in Japanese, we call it the lost 30 years. The basically the basic salary in Japan, the average salary hasn't been rising for the past 30 years,
Mm.
which is very different from the world because even for example, next to Japan and Korea, it's been growing at least a few percent. But in Japan, it's been stagnant or actually declining for a really long time. So that's one of the big reasons we simply just don't have the money, for example, to get married or to have kids. Most people don't. I'm gonna have 3 kids, so I'm kind of out of the box. But I think a lot of people, when we ask them why aren't you going to be getting married or having kids and such, they say I don't have the money to do that. You know.
Mm. Interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's tough when wages stay stagnant, but
Oh yeah.
typically prices still go up. over time.
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening in Japan right now because you probably know about yen is getting really really cheap right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. So all of our importing, whatever it is, the food we buy, or everything is getting really, really expensive, but our wages stay the same. So it's big damage in Japan right now. Yeah, so I think that's probably a bigger thing on than women working because there are a lot of people, of course, more people working and such, but of course, at the same time, after they work, there are a lot of women who would love to have families and babies if they could, but they can't. So I would say personally, from my personal experience,
Mhm.
that would be the bigger reason. Yeah.
Interesting. So you said with women working and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
women to have children, they would have to take that significant time off. And then when there's
Mm-hmm.
women in power, they're probably going to be the breadwinner, so they probably can't even afford that time off.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I'm thinking I might be reaching here. I'm learning here, so bear with
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
When there's men in power, typically the powerful men get, multiple women, and they have the ability to
Mm-hmm.
impregnate multiple women. Women in power, they can't impregnate multiple men. So that might be
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. I'm spitballing here. I'm spitballing ideas. So don't
No,
chastise
no.
me, man.
No. I've heard that that study or ideas before too. So yeah,
Got you. So
biologically, it's completely understandable. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
what are the top 5 things a traveler needs to know when coming to Japan?
Travel.
Yeah, top 5 things. Like
Mm-hmm.
an American coming to Japan. What are some things that they should know?
Um, Top five things. Let me think. Well, one thing I can absolutely say is there's very, very few English in Japan. I think if you go to Tokyo, like the bigger cities, Tokyo will be absolutely fine. But if you go outside of the bigger cities, maybe Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, you'll be okay. But anywhere else, if you want to see more of the countryside of Japan and such, there's hardly like any English on the signs or stuff like that. So like being able to, for example, you should be ready for that. So it might be, try to memorize a few words. Maybe if you want to go to the countryside, that is, you should absolutely not expect people to be able to speak English, first of all, and to find any English signs or instructions. So you should be
Mhm.
ready. Maybe it could be Google Translate and scanning the words or, whatever it is. I think you should be prepared, absolutely. Yeah, and that's, yeah, maybe another thing. Japanese people really, most people can't speak English. So that is something going to be a challenge for you too. It'll be fun if you're traveling, but I think yeah, is it something you want to say?
No, I kind of figured that because they're
Yeah,
so like embedded in their own culture, so they would want to
exactly.
mix and mingle with others. So it makes sense.
Mhm. And other things. Well, traveling to Japan. Well, I usually, well, I don't know, this might be off topic, but if you're looking for a good month to travel in Japan, I usually recommend May, by the way. It's cherry blossoms. If you like want to do something specific, like you want to see the cherry blossoms, you want to go to the beach or go skiing and such, you need to of course choose the right seasons. But otherwise, if you just want to see the places, look around, like learn the history or culture, go shopping and such, May is absolutely great because it's away from the cherry blossom seasons, which is super crazy and busy. It's not hot yet, hot and humid. Japan gets really, really hot and humid, so it's not that yet. And also the autumn leaves would be crazy too. Yeah, and it's not too cold either. So May would absolutely be a really good timing to travel. I would usually recommend. Oh, what else can I say? Um, I would say if you have the time, it'd be great if you can check out my channel and learn more about the history and culture and such. Because if you start going to the shrines and temples and such and walking around and you plan everything because you hear that the temples and shrines are famous and you start going there without any knowledge, you'd be like, okay, so I've seen a lot of buildings and I've seen a lot of buildings. Another building is here, and it's like that. But if you have a little bit of information about why these buildings are here, why they're built this way, or which part you should look out for to enjoy it and such, you'll definitely be able to enjoy more about it. So I would personally recommend you learning a little bit about the history and getting a little bit of knowledge before going. It'd be much more fun.
I would have to have a tour guide in Japan. I don't think I
And
would.
that would be a great idea too, be able to meet a local and having a guide and having him or her teach you more about it. That'd be great too, I would absolutely say.
I don't think I'd have a choice. I don't speak the language. I don't read it. So 'cause that was gonna be in my next question is like what like how would someone get around? How would someone communicate? Like because I've seen people though like visit Japan and do things. I'm just like how do you even talk to anybody? Like once you get off that flight, you're basically a fish out of water. So how does someone get around and do things in Japan if they have no idea of how to, you know, speak the language?
I really would love to ask everyone too, actually, because I've never been a traveler, in Japan. I'm Japanese, so I don't know.
Yeah,
The people
yeah.
I've met before, though, definitely has like learned a few words or how to ask questions before they came. Yeah, or just continuing to try to find a person who can speak English. I've heard a lot of people, when they seemed troubled or lost, someone will come and help them. Yeah, there are like a lot of people who are willing to help, though, I would say.
Got you. Okay. So definitely,
Hmm.
so stay in the big cities and then look confused and lost, and and hope somebody comes to your
Some
aid.
will help you, I hope. Yeah, I hope. Yeah, I heard a lot of stories of people being helped by just locals walking by and asking them about what kind of help they need and such. So.
Got you. It's rare that I see people go to Japan, but I've seen some Americans go to Japan. I'm just like, how? It
Hmm.
looks like they have a lot of bright colors in Japan, which
Yeah.
look like they make great for an aesthetically pleasing picture. So
Hmm.
definitely, I would like to go to Japan one day. One day.
It would be
Um,
great, I would say.
what my final question? How would
Go
you like
ahead.
to be remembered?
How do I want to be remembered?
Yes.
Well, the goal that I have in my life, actually, I always talk about this in my channel too, my podcast too, actually. But what I really want to do is I want to make every Japan lover's dreams come true. So basically, I know there's a lot of people who are outside of Japan, for example, they're in their teenage years, for example. They would be like they watch anime, they watch movies, they would read a book about Japan. They'd be like, "Wow, it would be great if I could go to Japan someday." Yeah, I want to see the culture and history. I want to train how to use the katana. Could be playing an instrument or whatever it is. I want to do that. But again, as we talked about earlier, Japan, the economy is weakening, the population is declining, and there's tons of social issues going on in Japan right now. And I don't want the future generations, when they say, oh, let's go to Japan, they come here and all of their dreams, not coming a reality because Japan wasn't ready. Japan doesn't have anything anymore. Because, like, take, for example, the traditional cultures too, the population is absolutely declining. And there's all of the hierarchical troubles and everything. I talk about this a lot in my videos too. But I actually made a video talking about I Hate Yaido, which is the katana martial art, and talked about all the things that I really hate about the organizations and all the structural problems that we have. So I really want to change that. I really want to change, and I always say I want to evolve and preserve traditional culture and try to solve social problems and try to help out the younger generations too. I'm actually constantly donating to single mothers and children who are living in poverty in Japan. 1 out of 7 children in Japan are actually living in poverty. Yeah.
Children. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. It's crazy. So I'm actually donating certain amount of money to them. Yeah, so I really want to be remembered as the person who basically preserved important things, important teachings, important cultures of Japan, and connected it to the next generation. I want to be called Shogo.
Hmm.
That was the person who really saved Japan for the people overseas around the world who love Japan. It's all thanks to you that I was able to enjoy Japan. It was all thanks to you. That would be the way I would love to be remembered.
I think you could save Japan. I think
I
you could
believe in
save Japan.
myself too. I'll do everything I can.
And I definitely I like your goals. I like, you're very, very noble of you. And I think there's not a lot of people who have that kind of mindset, and you're developing the reach to actually have the kind of impact that you're looking for. So that's lovely, man. I definitely like what you're doing. Keep doing it, man.
Thank you so much. I just simply love what I do, so I'll definitely keep on going. Yeah, absolutely.
Gotta love what you do. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to me.
Thank you so much,
Paul.
dude. This was great. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, man. I try, man. I try. I try. I got a journalism major from college. I try to put it to
Hmm.
use, you know what I mean?
You're doing a great job, I think. Yeah, talking with you was a lot of fun.
Thank you.